They called him a fool for trying to raise 5 kids alone, said a man like him would break long before the winter did. But when a stranger rode into town with a scar she wouldn't explain and a secret she wouldn't share, everything changed. The baby wouldn't stop crying. Eli Mercer stood barefoot in the snow, the wind snapping through his shirt as he rocked little May against his shoulder. Inside, the cabin was chaos, 3 pots boiling over on the stove, the twins shouting over each other about a missing boot, and 12-year-old Ruth trying to scrub soot off the floorboards while watching the door like a hawk. May shrieked louder, red-faced and breathless. "I know, baby," Eli whispered, voice hoarse from 3 straight nights without sleep. He bounced her gently, eyes scanning the woods beyond the fence line. The trees loomed quiet and empty. For now, he'd lost track of how many weeks it had been since the last letter, since they'd been cut off, since he'd heard from the sheriff about the gang riding east. He ducked back inside. "Samuel, lay a coat and boot. Now, Ruth, take the pan off the stove before it burns." Ruth didn't argue. She was the only one who didn't anymore. The girl moved fast, dragging the iron pan to the side and covering it with a cloth. Eli set May down in her cradle and turned to the boy clutching a torn boot. "It don't fit," Samuel cried. "You outgrew it." "That ain't the boot's fault. I can't go to church barefoot." "We're not going to church. Then where?" Eli didn't answer. He grabbed the other boot from the hearth, patched with twine and leather scrap, and shoved it into the boy's hands. "Just get ready." "Ready for what?" But Eli was already grabbing his coat. He didn't have answers, not ones they needed to hear. The truth was simple. Food was low, money gone, and every able-bodied man in this county too scared or too smug to help a widower with 5 mouths to feed. They'd all heard what he'd done. How the gang came through 3 winters back. How he'd stood on his porch with a hunting rifle and a prayer. And how his wife Miriam had pled out trying to hold the back door shut. Some folks pitied him. Most just whispered that maybe he should run, that maybe it was pride that got Miriam killed. None of that mattered now. He saddled the old mule and packed what little jerky and cornmeal they had left. Ruth followed him out, her face pale in the morning light. "Where are you going?" "To town. What if they come back while you're gone?" "They won't." She looked up at him with her mother's eyes brown and sharp and too full of understanding for someone who should still been playing with dolls. "Be back before dark," she said. Quiet but firm, Eli nodded, pretending he had a choice. Dust swirled as he rode into Hartcliffe. The town hadn't changed. Same sagging saloon sign, same rusted hitching posts, same 3 old men on the bench outside the general store watching him like he didn't belong. He tied off the mule and stepped inside. The bell over the door jingled. Clara, behind the counter, raised a brow but didn't smile. "She never did, Mercer," she said. "Didn't expect you. Didn't expect to be here," he muttered. "What'll it be?" "Flour. Salt. Soap if you got any left." She nodded and started filling a sack. Eli counted coins from his pocket 6 times, to nickels, 1 quarter. Not enough. Clara paused when she saw the pile. "You're short." "I know. You'll have to put something back." He hesitated, then pushed the soap aside. Clara didn't move. "What?" he asked. She leaned on the counter. "You still trying to do this alone?" "I'm not here for a sermon. You should be." Eli scooped the sack and turned to leave, but stopped short at the sight of the woman standing in the doorway. She wore a long coat dusted with ash, her hair loose around her shoulders, a wide-brimmed hat low over her eyes. She looked like smoke and silence and something vaguely dangerous, and for a moment the room went still. Clara blinked. "You lost, miss." The woman's eyes lifted. "No, you new to Hartcliffe." "No, well, I don't know you. You do now." Clara looked offended. Eli didn't care. He pushed past her and walked out. He didn't need more strangers. He didn't need questions. He didn't even make it 10 steps before the woman followed. "You Eli Mercer," she said behind him. He didn't stop. "That a crime?" "Not yet." "Then leave me be." But she kept pace. "I heard about you." "Good for you. 5 kids. Cabin on Hollow Ridge. Wife died holding the back door." Eli turned. She stopped short, just out of reach. He looked her overcoat frayed at the cuffs, a sky jacket across the edge of her jaw, and something hard in her posture. She didn't look like trouble, but she didn't look like help either. "What do you want?" "I want to help." "I don't need help." She didn't argue. Just said, "They'll be back soon." "The gang. You from around here?" "No." "Then how do you know?" "I know." He stared. Then, "Name?" "Call me Marin. That your name?" "No." And she walked away. He didn't expect to see her again. But when he returned home that night, Ruth was on the porch with the baby and a rifle, and Maren was inside, stirring soup over the fire. Eli stood frozen in the doorway. How did you? She knocked, Ruth said, deadpan. I let her in. Maren didn't look up. The other kids were wide-eyed around the table. Ben, the youngest besides May, clutched a wooden spoon like it might save him. Leah and Samuel were whispering. Ruth looked proud. Eli was furious. Get out, no, Maren said. This is my home, and your children are starving. I didn't ask you here, but you need me. I don't make cried. Eli turned instinctively. By the time he looked back, Maren was already holding the baby, rocking her with the ease of someone who'd done it 100 times. He watched her. She didn't ask permission. She didn't demand thanks. She didn't offer stories or explanations. Just moved like she belonged. He hated how right it felt. That night, the wind shifted. The kind of shift you feel in your chest before your bones. Eli woke with a start and found Maren already on the porch, rifle in hand, eyes on the ridge. You feel that? She said. He nodded. Something's coming. You always like speaking in riddles. Only when people don't want the truth. What truth? She didn't look at him. They're close. Real close. Who? You already know. Eli's grip on the doorframe tightened. The gang. The same one that killed Miriam. The same one that had taken 3 neighbors the winter after. Everyone thought they'd vanished. Everyone but Maren. You got a plan? I always have a plan, she said. Question is whether you've got the will to follow one. He stared at her, heart pounding, and knew something had changed the moment she'd walked through the door. And not just for him, for all of them. He didn't sleep the rest of that night. Just stood with his back to the cold wall, the rifle leaning against the sill, eyes watching the shadow line where trees met sky. Maren hadn't come back inside, not even when the snow picked up again. Powder whispering against the windows, soft as breath. She stood in the dark like she didn't feel cold at all. By morning, Eli was the first to rise, though he'd never truly fallen asleep. Ruth stirred next, silent and watchful as she padded to the hearth and coaxed a flame from yesterday's coals. She didn't ask where Maren had come from. Not this time. She just glanced toward the door and said, she didn't lie. No, Eli admitted. And she knew about the gang. Still doesn't mean I trust her. Ruth looked at him, then quietly said, might not matter if she's the only one who'll help. The words stuck more than they should, but Ruth wasn't being cruel, just honest. And that was worse. When he opened the door, the first thing he saw was Maren asleep on the porch, back against the post, rifle in her lap. A thin dusting of snow clung to her coat and hat. She looked more like a statue than a woman, still quiet, carved out of something harder than flesh. You'll freeze, Eli said. She didn't move. I've been colder. You always this stubborn? Yes, he sighed. Then get inside before the kids wake up and think you died on the porch. That got her to stand. She didn't groan, didn't stretch, didn't shake the stiffness from her limbs, just walked past him into the cabin like she belonged there. And in that moment, Eli realized something else. He didn't know how to ask her to leave anymore. By mid-morning, Maren was repairing the roof with Samuel and Leah, using tar Eli didn't know they still had and cedar branches from the back ridge. She moved with purpose, teaching them without patronizing, letting them ask questions but not entertain excuses. Ben followed her like a shadow. Even May, who cried for nearly everyone else, would quiet in her arms. Eli watched from the yard with a mixture of unease and awe. It wasn't just that Maren was competent. It was the way she carried herself, like someone who'd lived through storms and come out forged by them. She didn't fill the space Miriam left, but she didn't tiptoe around it either. That part scared him most. He was chopping wood when Ruth came out with a coat too thin for the wind. She said we should make traps, the girl said. For rabbits. And maybe fox. Eli paused. Fox will chew your leg off, not the way she makes him. He wiped his brow. And you think we can trust her? I think she's the only one who hasn't lied to us in a long time. He hated that answer. Hated it even more because he could argue. That night, after the kids were asleep, Maren handed him a cup of tea by the fire. Not the herbal kind his wife used to make, but something darker, bitterer. Eli sipped and almost gagged. What is this? Rootstock and coffee dust. From what year? Doesn't matter. You stay awake. I wasn't planning to sleep anyway. She nodded like that made sense, then added, they're 2 days out. He stilled. The gang? They've already hit Sutter's Creek. His stomach turned. You sure? Left a rancher nailed to his own barn. Shot the horses. Took the kids. Eli sat down hard. They always send one ahead, she continued. Scouts first. The rest follow once they know what they're walking into. Then we need to run. No, he blinked at her. No, if you run, they'll hunt you. If you hide, they'll flush you. If you beg, they'll make you regret it. You have to stand. With what? A shotgun and a pitchfork. With the land. With what you know. With what you still have. He wanted to laugh. Wanted to scream. Instead, he stared into the fire and whispered, "You talk like you faced them before." She didn't answer, but something in her eyes told him he'd struck the truth. The next day, Maren took Ruth and Ben down to the creek with fishing lines made of horsehair and bent nails. Eli spent the hours mending the fence, hammering boards that barely held together. Every time he turned, he half expected her to be gone. But she always came back. They ate trout and cornbread that night, and for the first time in weeks, the kids laughed during supper. May gurgled as she chewed on a spoon. Samuel told a joke no one understood, but everyone laughed anyway. Leah leaned her head on Eli's shoulder like she used to when Miriam was alive. After they'd gone to bed, Maren and Eli sat by the fire again. "You said you faced them," he said. She nodded. "What happened?" "They came through my town same as this. Said they wanted food, horses, whatever else. No one stopped them. And you?" "I tried. What did it cost?" Maren reached up slowly and pulled her collar back. Beneath it, a scar twisted down her neck, white and ragged. Another slashed across her collarbone. "They left me for dead," she said. Eli felt cold. "Why come here? Why now?" "Because no one helped me. And maybe helping you is the only way I sleep again." He didn't know what to say. So he said nothing. That night, dogs howled in the distance. Not their own. Not from any ranch nearby. A low, mournful sound that echoed down the valley like a warning bell. Maren was already up, rifle loaded, hat on. "They're here," she said. Eli's blood went cold. Now, not the full crew, just one. A scout, maybe two. He glanced at the children's room. "We can't fight them yet." "No," she said, "but we can watch." She led him through the woods behind the cabin, moving like shadow, soundless. They crouched by the ridge, overlooking the path that curved from town. And sure enough, a lantern bobbed in the dark, horse hooves crunching snow. A silhouette hunched in the saddle. "Don't shoot," Maren whispered. "Not unless they step off the trail." The rider slowed, stopped by a fence post, then turned back the way he came. He didn't see them. Not this time. But they'd seen him at dawn. Eli couldn't lie anymore. He called the children to the hearth. "Listen to me," he said. "There's danger coming." The twins looked confused. Ruth's mouth tightened. Ben just clung to Man's coat. Even May seemed to sense the tension and whimpered softly. "Bad men?" Leah asked. "Yes. What do we do?" Samuel asked. Eli hesitated. And for the first time, Maren spoke for him. "We prepare." She unrolled a map she'd drawn by hand marks for the ridge, the fence lines, the traps she'd begun setting. The kids leaned in close, their fear giving way to something else. Resolve. Maybe even excitement. "Ruth and Ben will handle the traps. Samuel and Leah, you're on lookout from the laugh. Eli, you and I build a fallback." "The what?" he asked. She looked at him. "The place you go when all else fails." He exhaled, then nodded. For 2 days, they worked like war was already on their doorstep. Ruth reset snares, taught Ben how to whistle warnings. Samuel climbed trees with a spyglass. Leah painted rocks bright red and hid them around the property signals. Maren said, "Triggers." Eli dug trenches with numb hands. Maren built spike boards and pit covers. They set bells on strings across trees, left dry brush in the paths most likely to snap underfoot. By the third night, the air was heavy. "The trees to still. They'll come by dawn," Maren said. Eli looked at his sleeping children, then at her. "You should have been a general. I was something worse," she replied. The wind picked up before sunrise. Snow hadn't fallen, but the cold was cruel, sharp, metallic, like the air knew what was coming. Eli sat on the porch with the shotgun across his lap, Maren beside him with the rifle. Then came the bell. One soft jingle, Ruth's voice from the loft window. "Riders." 5, maybe 6. Eli's heart thudded. Maren stood. No lights, no noise. The children ducked into hiding spots, rehearsed a dozen times. May was wrapped tight and hidden in the root cellar with Ben. Ruth took the twins and disappeared into the hayloft. Eli and Maren stepped out into the yard. The riders came into view like ghosts, silent, dog-coated, faces masked. The leader dismounted. Slowly, boots crunching frost. "You Mercer?" he asked. Eli didn't answer. The man shrugged. "Heard you got a farm worth stealing. Thought we'd pay a visit." "You won't find anything worth the trouble." Eli said. The man grinned.
We always do. He raised his hand to signal the others, and that's when the trap Marin said snapped. A line of boards flipped, sending the second rider tumbling into the pit.
His scream was quick and swallowed by the frost. Another's horse bolted when it hit a hidden spike strip. Two more turned to run, only to find their retreat blocked by burning brush lit from the back hill where Ruth had waited with lantern oil. Eli turned his shotgun on the last man standing and said, "Go home," but the leader wasn't looking.
At him, he was staring at Marin. "You," he said. Her rifle didn't waver. "You were dead." "No," she said. "Just patient." She fired once. He fell. The silence after the shot was unreal, like the world itself paused to breathe. Even the wind held its breath, snowflakes drifting without sound as the man's body collapsed into the frost. The horse he'd ridden reared once, then galloped off into the tree line, leaving only the wreckage of what had almost arrived. One of the riders in the pit groaned, and another, a younger one, not more than 19, crawled backward on hands and knees, his eyes wide and panicked, mumbling prayers. Eli stood frozen, the shotgun trembling in his grip. His ears rang from the blast, but not as loud as the truth ringing in his chest. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't blinked. The man who fell wasn't just any raider, he was someone from her past. And she'd pulled the trigger with the clarity of someone who'd been waiting years for that moment. Marin didn't speak. She walked forward with the kind of quiet you'd expect from snowfall, not soundless, but final. She stopped beside the man's body, knelt slowly, and rolled him over. Her face didn't change, but something about her shoulders did. Eli saw the twitch in her hand when she touched the edge of his coat. "What was he to you?" he asked, barely able to hear his own voice. She didn't look up. "He's the reason I buried 3 people in a burned-out church and never said goodbye." He stepped closer, still unsure whether to be afraid of her or grateful. "He said you were dead." "I was. The woman I used to be died the night he found us." She stood, finally meeting Eli's eyes. "But I wasn't buried." "Not yet." Behind them, a rustling came from the hayloft. Ruth's voice called out cautiously, "Is it over?" "Not yet," Marin said. "Get everyone back inside. Move fast." Eli turned toward the pit. One of the gang members inside had passed out. The younger one, the boy, was still sitting in the snow, shaking like a branch. He didn't reach for his gun. Didn't even seem to remember he had one. "What do we do with him?" Eli asked. Marin walked up to the boy, crouched low. "You got a name?" He nodded jerkily. "J. Johnny. You local?" "No, ma'am. I joined in Montana." She glanced at Eli, then back at the boy. "Ever kill anyone?" He shook his head frantically. No, I swear. I just carried supplies. Honest. I never. Please don't kill me." She stared at him a long time, then stood. "Drop your guns. Take the horse you came in on. Head east and don't look back. If I ever see you again, I finish what they started." Johnny scrambled to obey, fumbling his sidearm from its holster and tossing it into the snow. He didn't look back as he ran. Didn't speak. Just disappeared into the trees like the cold had swallowed him whole. Eli watched the boy go, then turned to her. "You just let him go." "He was already dying," she said. "Just not the kind of death you measure with blood." By morning, they dragged a pit casualty into the woods. The other man never woke. Ruth helped Eli burn the bridge trail so no new riders could come in without warning. The smoke curled above the pines, thick and black, a message for anyone watching. The family gathered around the table for breakfast. It was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet they'd known in weeks past. This was something else. The kind of silence people sat in after thunder passed, unsure whether the next bolt would strike closer. Ben played with a bit of cornmeal mush, clearly still shaken. Lear traced patterns in the frost on the window pane. Samuel kept one eye on the tree line, even as he chewed. Only Ruth seemed steady. Eli noticed how she sat a little straighter now, her eyes sharper than before. "What happens now?" she asked, eyes flicking to Marin. "They'll come again," Marin said simply. "More than 6. Eli asked. She nodded. "Much more, you think that Scout Johnny, you think he'll warn them off?" She shook her head. "No, he'll be used as a reason to come faster. They'll say we're rebels, that we need cleansing." Eli's jaw clenched. "Then we need to leave." But Marin didn't answer. She stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the trees like she could see past them. "You can run. You have little ones, but they'll find you. They always do. You think we just wait for them to finish what they started?" Ruth asked, voice trembling. "Like Mama's town?" Eli turned sharply. "Ruth," but Marin raised her hand. "No, she's right to ask." She turned from the window, her eyes steady. You are not farmers anymore. Not for now. You are defenders, survivors.
And you've already lasted longer than most. The next day, they trained. Marin had each child run drills: how to hide, how to signal danger, how to move silently from one shelter to another. Eli helped build
barricades between trees, using old barn wood, rocks, whatever they could find. Ruth proved a natural with the slingshot. Samuel learned to aim with the old revolver, his hands shaking at first, but growing still by sunset. You were military? Eli asked as they dug another trench. Something like that, Marin replied.
Before all this, before the country forgot what it meant to protect its own, were you always alone? No, you ever tell the truth in a straight line?
No, that made him laugh, despite everything, and she smiled, just a flicker. But the moment passed, and her gaze returned to the tree line. She still carried something heavier than what she'd admitted. He wondered if she'd
ever share it. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Marin came into the kitchen holding something wrapped in a cloth.
It was her locket, a dented silver thing that caught the firelight. I haven't opened this in for years, she said. Eli didn't speak. She flicked it open and laid it between them on the table. Inside were two small faces.
A boy and a girl,
smiling, caught forever in some summer memory.
Behind them, the blurred silhouette of a man with a crooked smile and sunburned neck. My family, she said. Before the raid, he stared down, unsure what to say. They died thinking I'd
make it, that I'd come back for them. I was caught scouting the far ridge.
Took me 3 days to crawl home. By then, her voice cracked just slightly.
She closed the locket. That man I shot, he laughed when he saw me crawling. Told me they'd let the kids scream for a full hour. Eli swallowed hard.
I'm sorry. I don't want your pity, she said sharply, then softened. But I want you to know where I stayed. He nodded. I won't let it happen again, she whispered. Snow fell heavier that night. The wind howled like a beast denied meat.
Eli sat on the porch again, shotgun beside him.
But this time, he wasn't alone.
Ruth took the step beside him, blanket over her shoulders. You should be in bed, he said. So should you. He looked at her, at the quiet steel in her expression.
She reminded him of Miriam, same eyes, same stubborn chin. He felt something twist in his chest. Do you miss her?
Ruth asked quietly. Every second. Me too. They didn't speak for a long while after that. Just sat, side by side, listening to the wind and the creak of trees. Be why the third day, the snow stopped falling. The sky turned a pale, bruised grey, and smoke rose on the horizon. Riders, Samuel called from the loft. Big group, maybe 20. Eli's stomach dropped. They'll reach us by dusk, Marin said. He turned to her.
We can't hold
them off. No, she said.
But we can delay them. Long enough. Long enough for what? For them to make a mistake. The traps were set.
The fallback tunnels reinforced. The children were hidden in pairs, each with a task, a backup, route, and a promise. If things fell apart, they'd run.
No heroics.
Just survival. Eli stood at the tree line, shotgun across his back, revolver on his belt. Marin was beside him again, rifle in hand, eyes narrowed against the wind. They'll send fire first, she said.
Smoke us out, and
then
they'll come. Eli looked over his land, his home.
The fence Miriam painted.
The porch swing she used to rock May in. The barn Samuel learned to hammer in.
All of it, about to be tested by fire. I'm not ready, he admitted. No one ever is. When the first torch hit the shed, it felt like a funeral bell. The flames caught fast, dry wood sparking like tinder. The raiders hooped as more fire rained down on the outhouse, the coop, the fences. But Marin had planned for that. The coop exploded as the fire touched a buried keg of pitch, sending burning oil over.
2 of the gang.
Screams tore into the sky. The outhouse collapsed on a rider charging through the brush, its roof hiding a nest of bees disturbed by the smoke. Chaos erupted. Eli fired into the haze, dropping to silhouettes.
Marin moved like something born of wind and vengeance, silent.
Deadly, sure.
But they kept coming.
More than 20, maybe closer to 30. They spilled through the smoke like a tide of ash, and in the chaos, a new voice rang out. Eli.
Leah's hurt.
He turned sharply. Ruth's voice. He bolted toward it, heart thundering. He found them near the root cellar.
Leah on the ground, blood soaking her sleeve. Ruth trying to hold pressure. Eyes wild. She got clipped by a bullet, just to graze, I think. A rider burst from the trees behind them. Eli reached for his shotgun, but Marin was faster. She tackled the man off his horse, wrestled the blade from his belt, and drove it into his shoulder.
He screamed and dropped his pistol. Eli scooped Leah into his arms, Ruth following close behind. "Maren," he shouted. She didn't turn.
She was already pulling another weapon from the dead man's
belt and charging back toward the fire.
The fire painted the snow with flickers of red and gold, a devil's reflection against the cold earth.
Eli could feel the heat chasing them as he carried Leah to the kitchen floor, Ruth slamming the door behind them. The scent of singed hair and blood clung to the child's sleeve, and she whimpered, teeth clenched to keep from crying. He laid her down gently, and Ruth grabbed the rags and water basin they'd prepared hours ago in case this very moment came. "It's not deep," Ruth breathed, voice shaking. "Just messy." Leah didn't speak, only stared up at the ceiling like she was trying to disappear into it. "I need you to keep pressure here, all right?"
Ruth said, folding the cloth over the wound and placing the child's hand atop it.
"Good girl." Just like that, Eli turned to the window.
Flames clouded the barn now, and shadows moved in and out of the firelight riders, searching, closing in.
He could hear another gunshot.
2.
Then silence. His fingers twitched toward the rifle leaning against the table. "I have to go back out." "No," Ruth snapped, standing. "They're everywhere."
"And Maren, she's out there alone now. She's—"
"Not alone," Eli said. "She has me. She doesn't want. She stayed for us."
"All of us." His voice cracked, raw from smoke and fear and something deeper he couldn't name. "She's out there because she thinks she has to do it.
Alone."
But she doesn't.
"Not anymore." Ruth's jaw clenched. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Go." Outside. The smoke curled low and thick, catching in his throat with every step. The barn was a glowing skeleton now, beams cracking, sparks spinning upward.
Eli kept to the trees, crouched low, moving like Maren had taught him. No direct lines.
No open spaces. He followed the trail of scorched grass and bootprints until he heard it scuffling. Shouting, a gun cocked and uncocked. He edged around a blackened pine and found them in a clearing. Maren, blooded and cornered, facing 3 men. One of them had a machete. Another had a pistol. The third was the preacher, not a preacher in the spiritual sense. Eli had only seen the man once, months ago, on a flyer at the general store, warning of a righteous purge, but he knew the type. The coat, the Bible strapped to his belt, the smile. That didn't reach the eyes. "Maren Whitlow," the man said calmly.
"Or do you go by another name now?"
Maren didn't answer. "You can't outrun sin forever, you know. You killed God-fearing men." "They weren't men," she said. "They were monsters wearing boots," the preacher chuckled.
"You talk like a widow, but you fight like a soldier." She didn't move.
Blood trickled from her temple, her right hand trembling slightly. Eli stepped forward, slow and steady, until the preacher's eyes flicked to him. "Ah, the good father," he sneered.
"You know she led the raid on Oak Hollow? Slaughtered a dozen ranchers. She defended women and children against a gang of cowards." The preacher raised a brow. "She tell you about her husband? About the way he begged her to stay home that night?"
"She left him and her kids to go play hero." Eli looked at Maren. Her mouth was tight.
"She didn't deny it. She came back," Eli said.
"She buried them. You burned what was left." The preacher's face shifted.
The smile faded. Eli raised his rifle. "I won't let you hurt her."
"And I won't let you touch my family." The machete-wielding man lunged first. Eli fired. The shot echoed like thunder, and the man dropped, twisting as he fell. The second man raised his pistol, but Maren was faster.
A flash of silver, a grunt, and he collapsed, clutching his thigh, screaming. The preacher held his ground. "You think you can change her?"
he said, stepping back slowly.
"You think you can wash the blood of her hands?"
"No," Eli said.
"But I know she saved my children."
"That's more than you ever did." The preacher turned and ran. Eli raised the rifle again. "No," Maren said, touching his arm. "Let him carry the shame. Let it rot him." They stood in silence, watching. The tree swallowed the manhole. By dawn, the worst had passed.
3 more raiders lay dead, their bodies left for the crows.
The others fled, those not dead scattered across the hills, broken and howling. But the ranch was in ruins, the barn gone, the coop a black shell, the garden trampled, the smokehouse scorched.
Yet somehow the house still stood, scarred but
intact, and the children alive. Samuel carried Leah from room to room, whispering that she'd be okay, that Papa was home and Ruth was watching. Ben clung to Ruth like a shadow.
May didn't cry once.
Just watched, wide-eyed, as the grown-ups moved like soldiers. Later that evening, Eli sat beside the well, scrubbing blood from his hands.
It wouldn't come off.
"Not really." Maren approached quietly, You did good, she said. Not good enough. Look around, they're breathing, she replied. That's all that matters. He glanced up at her.
Her hair was tangled, her face bruised, hands scraped raw.
But there was a stillness to her now, like something inside had stopped running. You didn't have to stay, he said. She looked out at the horizon. I know, why did you?
Marin hesitated. Then finally, because I looked at your kids and saw mine. And because when you opened that door, you didn't flinch. He stood slowly. You saved us, Marin. I tried. No, he said, stepping closer.
You did. They stood inches apart, the cold air trembling between them. Her eyes held his. And for the first time since the fire, she didn't look like she wanted to run. But the moment broke when a shrill cry rang out from the house. Ruth, it was Ben. Ruth scoffing. They ran. Ruth was on the floor, knees folded under her, one hand on her chest.
Her face was pale.
Sweat lined her brow. I'm fine, she gasped. Just dizzy. Eli knelt beside her.
She inhaled too much smoke.
During the fire, Marin touched her pulse, checked her eyes, pressed a hand to her back. She's stable.
But weak. Her lungs took a hit. We need herbs, maybe honey.
And rest.
She can't be outside for days. Eli looked down at his daughter and saw something that froze him. She was too proud to cry, too proud to ask for help. Even now, can you ride?
He asked Marin. She nodded.
Supplies? Willow Run has a healer.
2 days west. I'll leave at first light. Eli hesitated. Are you sure?
She looked at him.
This time, I'm not running.
I'm coming back before dawn. She saddled the last remaining horse.
The kids hugged her without hesitation. Even Samuel, usually quiet, handed her a leather pouch of dried meat for the road, he mumbled. Eli walked with her to the edge of the trail. They stood in silence as the trees swayed overhead. I won't pretend to understand what you've been through, he said.
But I want to.
She looked at him, surprised. And I want my kids to grow up knowing someone like you, he added. She smiled soft, hesitant. Hold the line, she said. I'll be back in 3 days. Then she rode off into the grey, but by nightfall, only one rider returned, and it wasn't Marin. A boy barely older than Ruth stumbled into the yard, blood streaking his shirt, clutching the reins of Men's horse.
Eli ran to him, grabbed his shoulders. What happened?
Where is she? The boy gasped. Ambush. 2 miles out.
She saved me.
Said to get this to you. He handed Eli a folded scrap of cloth. Inside was her locket, the one she swore she hadn't opened in for years. Eli's breath caught. Then the boy collapsed.
The boy was still breathing, but barely. His hands were blistered raw from the reins. His coat soaked through with blood that didn't all belong to him. Ruth and Samuel lifted him inside, and Eli stayed frozen by the locket in his hand. Its
chain tangled with dried blood. He turned it over once, twice, afraid to open it.
Afraid of what message it carried, or what it might mean if there wasn't one at all. Papa, Ruth called. He needs help.
Now.
Eli tucked the locket into his coat pocket and rushed into the house.
The boy lay across the kitchen table now, shivering hard, his teeth chattering as Samuel tried to warm his feet with boiled rags. May hovered near the stove, stirring a weak broth. Where'd he come from? Eli asked. Same road she took, Ruth answered. The horse came straight here like it remembered. Eli pressed 2 fingers to the boy's neck. Pulse fast, erratic, but there.
He'd live.
But that didn't explain the locket.
Or the blood, or the fact that Marin hadn't come back on her own. She must have known she wouldn't make it, Ruth whispered.
That's why she gave him this. Eli said nothing. Later, when the boy woke, he could barely talk. His name was Denny. Said he'd been heading west alone when he saw the ambush. 2 men, rifles drawn, stepping out from the woods. He never saw Marin fall, only heard gunfire, saw her horse break free, and felt her shove him onto it with a
scream. Then darkness. She said to give you that thing, he muttered.
Said, you'd understand. Eli left the room. He didn't open the locket until the house was quiet. It was small and dented, no more than a thumb's width across. He thumbed a clasp, and it clicked open with a soft snap. Inside was a tiny sketch done in charcoal, old
and faded.
A man and 2 children, all 3 smiling.
The man had Men's nose.
The girl wore her expression, and beneath it, etched in the lining, 4 words barely legible. Forgive me. Stay safe. The next morning, Eli stood before the children, the fire crackling low behind him. I'm going after her, he said. Ruth's
lips parted.
Papa, no, she told you not to. She told me to hold the line, he said.
But this
is the line. Ruth shook her head.
You don't even know if she's alive. That's why I have to go.
The silence that followed was heavier than snow. Ben began to cry. May followed. Denny, pale and stiff, tried to rise but winced and sat back down. You said we had to stay together, Samuel said, quietly. Eli knelt beside them all. We will. Always. But sometimes, staying together means saving the people who saved us. I watched them, Ruth said finally, though her voice shook.
But come back.
Please come back. The road west had changed since the storm. Trees leaned lower now, branches broken from wind and fire. The trail Maren had taken twisted.
Near a ravine, then crossed a narrow bridge of stone over a frozen creek. That's where he found the first trace her satchel, torn and empty. Snagged on a briar bush, he moved faster, rifle ready. The sun was starting to fall when he spotted
the second sign. Track marks. Heavy, erratic.
Something had been pulled off the trail and into the woods. He followed. Minutes turned to hours, and then he heard it. A groan. He dropped to a crouch, caught the rifle, moved slow. Maren, no answer. He stepped into the thicket, heart pounding. There she was, slumped against a tree, legs splayed awkwardly, coat soaked through with snow and blood. Her face was pale, one eye swollen shut, but the other wide open, and fixed on him. About damn time, she rasped. He dropped beside her. You're alive. Barely. She tried to sit up, failed. Two of them, she whispered. Didn't.
See the third. Eli pressed a hand to her side. Blood. Dried, but thick. I have to get you back. No, she said. They're still out here. I don't care. I'm not leaving you out here to die alone. Not alone, she muttered, and something in her tone made him pause. She opened her hand. A ring lay there worn, gold small. I took it from him, she said. The last one.
Thought it might be worth something. Funny thing.
It was.
Mine. He looked at her. What was my husband's? Must been one of the same men.
From Oak Hollow.
The ones who burned our house. I kept thinking they were dead.
Guess I missed one. Her eyes closed. Maren, stay with me. She
didn't answer. He picked her up. The ride back was brutal. She passed out before they cleared the ridge, and the horse stumbled twice on the ice.
But they made it just as the second snowstorm began to fall. Ruth ran out screaming.
Denny limped behind her, dragging a blanket. Eli carried Maren straight to the bed. She's burning up, Ruth said, panicked.
We don't have anything
left. Eli looked around.
Everything they had was gone or ruined, except the preacher. He'd been headed east. There was a mission settlement 2 days out, on the border of the Black Ridge. They had healers, supplies, and he owed them that night. Eli didn't sleep.
He sat beside Maren, wiping her brow, whispering stories he used to tell Ruth when she was sick. He told her about the time Ben got his head stuck between the fence slats, about May trying to dig to China with a spoon, about the first snowfall after Rachel died, and how the baby, Samuel, didn't understand why Papa wouldn't sing that year. You made me sing again, he said.
Even if I didn't want to. Her breathing was shallow. You can't leave now. But she didn't stir. The next morning, he rode out again. Alone, he reached the preacher's trail by dusk, and found the campfire still warm.
The man hadn't gone far. Eli didn't know.
Just stepped into the clearing. The preacher sat by the fire, turning something in his hands. You followed, he said without looking up. You left her to die. The preacher tilted his head. I gave her mercy. You call that mercy?
I
call it God's judgment. Eli raised the rifle.
I call it cowardice. The preacher stood. You'll never outrun what she's done.
Not even with your precious little family. Eli stepped closer.
She didn't run.
She stayed. She saved us. The preacher smiled. Slow and terrible. She'll die for it.
Eli didn't hesitate. The shot rang through the woods like thunder. He returned with bandages, herbs, honey, and a single sheet of parchment, a note from the mission, saying a healer would come by week's end. Maren still breathed.
Barely, but
that night she opened her eyes. Still here. She croaked. Still here, he whispered, clutching her hand, and he didn't let go.
3 days passed before the healer arrived, and Maren slipped in and out of herself, the whole time, sometimes whispering words no one understood, sometimes silent as death, other times waking just long enough to drink, or to ask for Eli with her hand stretching blindly in the dark. The children took turns watching her, but Ruth stayed the longest, night after night, with a wet cloth and whispered prayers, her voice growing hoarse from pleading with a God she hadn't spoken to since their mother died.
The preacher's supplies had helped, but the fever ran too deep, the wound too close to the bone. and her body fought harder than it had any right to.
Eli barely left the room. He didn't speak much either, just sat with his hand wrapped around hers like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world. And the healer came, an older woman in a red shawl and a thick braid of grey that reached her waist. She didn't speak right away, just knelt by Marin, peeled the blood-crusted bandage away, and exhaled through her nose like someone who'd seen worse but wasn't hopeful. She murmured something Eli couldn't catch and opened her satchel. Her tools were few, but she worked with the calm of someone who had saved lives and lost them both, and she didn't waste words pretending she knew the outcome. Ruth stood stiff beside her, wringing the hem of her dress. The healer glanced at her once and nodded. "I'll need space. Boil everything you've got."
"I mean everything." The kitchen turned into a quiet flurry, steam rising from every pot.
Cloth boiled until it yellowed, the smell of burning sage and sweat thick in the air.
No one cried.
No one asked questions.
They all moved like sleepwalkers through a storm, like somehow, if they kept their hands busy, the world wouldn't crack.
Wide open again. It took hours. When it was done, the healer stood in the doorway, wiping her brow. "She's strong," she said. "But if she lives, it'll be because she decided to." They waited.
Another day.
Then another. And on the third morning, when the frost outside
was thick enough to dull the window panes white, Marin opened her eyes and didn't drift off again. Her voice came back in pieces, her strength slower. But it came all the same. When she could sit up on her own, Ruth brought her broth, and May brought her a bundle of feathers she'd found and tied with string. Marin smiled at both of them.
Touched the feathers like they were the finest treasure she'd ever seen. Eli didn't ask her anything. Not yet. He just sat across from her at the kitchen table, hands folded, waiting for her to speak. And eventually, she did. "They weren't after me," she said, staring into the fire. "Not exactly. It was never just me." Eli looked at her. "What do you mean?"
"I mean, they wanted what I knew.
"What I'd seen."
I was married to one of them once, before everything turned.
They didn't just run a gang, they buried secrets, land theft,
burned families out of their homes. I tried to leave, then they tried to bury me too." She took a slow sip of water.
Her hand still shook, but her voice was steady now. "I ran, hid, changed my name.
But someone must recognize me when we were in town last week.
They followed. I thought I could lead them off the trail before they found the house."
Eli said nothing. She looked at him, more tired than he'd ever seen.
"I didn't mean
for your children to be dragged into this." "They weren't dragged," he said. "You saved them."
"More than once." She laughed once, weakly. "You're a fool." "Probably." Still, her voice dropped. "I didn't think anyone
would come for me." "I told you before," Eli said, leaning forward.
"You were never just passing through." By the end of that week, she was strong enough to stand. She leaned on Ruth the first time, and on Eli the second, and by the third, she walked from the bedroom to the kitchen unaided. The children greeted her with cheers, and Samuel had drawn something on the table in charcoal, a picture of their family, with a figure beside them holding a rifle and a scarf blowing in the wind. "That's you," he said proudly. Marin blinked, but said nothing. Just touched the drawing gently and nodded, but peace didn't last. 2 nights later, they heard horses. Not many, but enough. The family huddled in the dark while Eli and Marin crouched by the window. The hooves came slow, careful. Whoever they were, they didn't want to be heard. But the dog growled low, and May's hand tightened on the rifle like her body remembered before her mind caught up. Eli motioned for the children to stay put, then slipped outside, keeping to the shadows. The night was black but dry, the moon casting long fingers through the bare branches. He saw them first by the old fence. 3 men, one holding a lantern low, another with a rifle slung across his back, the third climbing the porch steps. Eli raised his gun. "Don't," Marin whispered from behind him.
"That's not them." "What?" "I know the way they move," she said, already stepping past him. "That's not them." She walked straight into the lantern's glow, her
scarf fluttering like a ghost's shadow. The man on the porch turned, startled, but didn't draw. "Marin," he said. "Jesus, you look like hell." "I earned it." The man came closer.
"We've been looking for you." "Looking," she echoed, like the word tasted rotten. "I came to help," he said. "I was part of the Hollow, back before it turned." "You remember me?" She narrowed her eyes.
"You were the one who refused to carry torches." He smiled, rueful.
"Figured fire spreads easy when men stop caring what they burn. What do you want?" "They're coming," he said. "The ones who followed you here. They know you didn't die in the woods." "How long?"
2 days, maybe 3. Why warn me?
Because you were right to leave, he said. And because I saw what they did to your sister, she flinched.
You saw it. I held her hand after, he said. Until the morning came, Marin said nothing, just stepped back. You stay here? He asked, glancing at the house. I do now. You trust him? The man nodded toward the door where Eli stood, gun lowered. She looked at Eli, long and quiet. Yes, she said. I do. The stranger left before dawn, leaving behind a map scrawled in ink and blood of where the men would come from, and how best to intercept them before they reached the house. Eli studied it like scripture, and when the sun rose, he called Ruth.
Out back. I need you to take the others to Miller's Ridge.
There's a woman there named Clara.
Tell her I sent you. Papa, no, this house is gonna be fire and smoke by tomorrow night. I won't have you in it. And you? I'm staying.
With Marin, Ruth's eyes brimmed. Why? Because she stood when no one else would. Because she's part of this family now.
And because I won't let them take another woman from us. She pressed her forehead to his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her. Longer than he ever had before.
Take care of them, he whispered. No matter what.
She left an hour later, leading the wacky with May asleep on her shoulder, Ben curled up with a book in his lap, and Samuel holding Denny's hand so tight it turned white. Marin stood beside Eli, the map open between them. They're going to
try to flank, she said. Use fire to push us into the clearing. It's what they did last time. Then we don't let them. She looked at him. You've got 5 kids.
You don't need to die over me. Dying's not the plan. She gave him a look. Not the first plan. He clarified. She snorted once. All right.
What is?
He tapped the corner of the map.
We burn the bridge behind the ridge.
Trap him in. Then lead him to the gulch.
That old mine entrance?
It's narrow, but enough to draw him in. And then
we collapse it. She stared at him. That's actually smart. Don't look so surprised. They spend the next day setting traps, digging shallow trenches, hiding the children's things under the floorboards. The old mine still had 2 barrels of powder from when the town tried to dig for silver.
They rolled them into place, careful not to rattle the metal too loud when night came. They didn't light the fire.
Just sat in silence, listening for hooves. They came just before dawn. 8 riders, no torches, moving like wolves in wind. Eli and Marin took their places.
The plan was tight. Ruth was far enough now, and Miller's Ridge had strong walls.
If everything went wrong, the kids would still be safe. Ready? He asked. Marin cocked the rifle. Let's finish this. The hooves struck soft against frostbitten dirt, soundless but for the occasional jangle of bit or creak of saddle. The riders came slow, heads low, weapons already drawn, not a warning, not a gesture of peace. They weren't here for talk. They
were here to erase something. Marin stood still behind the split rail of the fence, just close enough to the darkened barn to retreat if things turned wrong.
Eli crouched further up the ridge, rifle balanced across a stack of crates and the first
trigger line ready beneath his boots.
Neither of them spoke.
They'd been through their plan enough times, mapped it with hands in the dirt, traced it in the silence between breath and heartbeat.
Talking now would only give the nerves somewhere to go. The lead rider dismounted before the others did.
A man in a brown duster with a scar down his cheek that caught what little moonlight remained. He was older than Marin remembered, but not by much. His name was Jedediah Crane, once a foreman at the hollow mine and then the self-proclaimed justice of the plains, though justice, in his mouth, had never meant much beyond control.
Behind him, the rest fanned out.
All faces Marin knew. All men who had once passed through her home like family, like friends, before their eyes had shifted to greed and blood.
That you, Marin? Jedediah called, his voice rough but not loud. She didn't answer. She stepped forward instead. Thought you might have been dead. He went on, stepping closer. Try to believe it, even. Would made everything cleaner. She met his eyes.
That's the thing about truth.
It doesn't stay buried. Well, sometimes it does, he said, glancing back at his men. If you dig deep enough.
You should have stayed quiet. You killed my sister for speaking. He flinched.
Barely.
You remember her?
Marin asked.
She wore a blue ribbon in her hair. Told you the land you claimed wasn't yours. That you'd stolen it of the bones of families. She told you no, and you dragged her out by her hair. Crane's jaw tightened. It wasn't that simple. It never is, she said softly. Then she raised the rifle. The shot rang out sharp and sudden. Not from her barrel. But Eli's, his round caught the man just behind Jedediah in the shoulder and threw him backward of his horse.
Shades exploded. Another shot cracked out, followed
by a scream. Horses reared.
The gang scrambled to draw, and by the time their second bullet whistled past Man's head, she had already dropped behind the fence and was sprinting for the ridge. The traps worked better than either of them had.
They had hope. The first line of ground cracked under the weight of the horses, sending 2 of the animals tumbling into the shallow pit lined with broken boards and stone. Maren and Eli pulled the tripwire that sent the crates tumbling from the slope smoke.
And powder bursting like dry thunder, and when the riders swerved around it, they were already where Eli wanted them, flustered and confused, in sight of the gulch. Now,
Maren yelled, together. They broke from the ridge, firing as they ran.
The gang gave chase, but staggered, half of them blinded, one dragging a leg.
Eli ran ahead, reached the entrance of the abandoned mine, and ducked into the side channel where
the powder barrels were wired. Maren followed, slamming her shoulder into the last post to close the rusted gate behind her. The horses came too fast to stop.
2 men leapt off before they hit the entrance.
The rest barreled in. Eli struck the match. Maren turned her head. The explosion split the hill.
Dirt and wood and rock belched outward like the mountain itself had howled.
One rider got flung clear and rolled into the bushes. The others disappeared behind a plume of fire and falling timbers, then silence.
A long, ringing silence, like the land was stunned. Maren staggered to her feet, covered in ash, bleeding from her hairline, and limped toward the wreckage.
Eli was already up, scanning the tree line from the side. A figure rose Jedediah Crane, stumbling, half his coat burned, but alive.
He coughed once, gun still in hand. Maren raised hers, but he was faster. The shot cracked across the ridge. Maren froze. Then she looked down, dot in her blood. Behind her, Jedediah dropped to his knees. Then sideways, Ruth stood at the top of the slope, her hands still trembling around Eli's old rifle. She didn't move.
She didn't speak.
She just looked down at the man who'd haunted their father's silence and her own nightmares. And then she dropped the gun into the dirt. I couldn't. Go, she said.
Not while you stayed. Maren fell against Eli's side, and for once he let himself sag too. They stood like that a long time, the last of the smoke curling up toward the morning sky. The house held scars, but they rebuilt. Word of what happened traveled faster than wildfire.
Folks who once called Eli a fool for raising 5 kids alone now dropped off flour, lumber, even a new door.
The preacher came by with canned peaches and didn't ask a single question about the bodies the sheriff carted out of the woods.
He just nodded at Maren and said, God sent you. She laughed once, dryly. I doubt he even knows I'm still breathing. Then he's got poorer eyesight than I thought. The preacher said, because you sure look like a miracle too.
Me. Ruth took over the schoolhouse 2 months later.
May kept the feather bundle Maren gave her above her bed. Samuel asked every week if he could make more drawings for Man's shelf.
Ben read out loud to the baby, who still hadn't picked a name, and Denny stopped crying in his sleep. Eli still rose before dawn, still worked the land like it owed him answers.
But he smiled more,
spoke more,
sat longer at the dinner table, especially when Maren was beside him. She never said she was staying.
She didn't have to. Her scarf hung on the hook by the door now.
Her boots lined up next to his. One evening, long after the others had gone to bed, Eli found her standing at the edge of the porch, looking out at the stars. You all right?
He asked. She nodded. I was just
listening. To what?
She didn't answer right away.
Then, to the sound of nothing hunting me, he stepped closer. You think it's over?
No, she said, but I think
I'm not running anymore.
He reached out, not to pull her close, but just to hold her hand. It was enough. Weeks passed, then months. One night, a letter came left on the porch. No horse tracks, no name, just a wax seal stamped in the shape of a sparrow. Maren stared at it a long time before opening it. Inside, a single sentence. They're rebuilding in the north. She looked at Eli. He didn't blink.
When do we ride? Maren looked around the house, the quiet bedrooms, the sleeping children, the candle flickering low. Not yet, she said.
But soon. He nodded, and when they finally did leave, when the wind turned again and the scent of trouble reached their door, it was together, because no one mocked the father anymore, and no one underestimated the woman who walked beside him. Not anymore, not ever again.